Okay, so this is going to be segment number 2 of the sex and marriage and men and women type thing here, segment number 2. And so what we're going to talk about now is that the how women and men think as far as wanting to try to find a marriage partner. So the first thing to understand is that let's see what I want to keep up here. Let's do this. So men's, and this is in general, man has a greater sex drive than woman. The greater sex drive than woman. And the reason is because there has to be someone who initiates this stuff. Because the woman and the man, you're not related. So you got to find somebody of the opposite sex so that you'll be complete. If you're a woman, you don't think rationally. If you're a man, you don't think emotionally. Again, not mutually exclusive, but in general, that's how it works. And so the man needs somebody to complete him emotionally, and the woman needs somebody to complete her rationally. So they both desire to get, because they only have half a mind. They're half ignorant. So they both desire to get that other part of the brain that they're missing as a result of the brain, the opposite sex brain being in another body now. So they both desire to get that. So you got to have, but to get together, somebody's got to, take the step. So the man has a greater sex drive than the woman, and that makes the man the initiator. Because remember, we read in 1 Timothy 2:13 that man is the head of the woman. So since he is the head of the woman, what God does is he gives man a greater sex drive so that the man pursues the woman. Now, I know women do things to try to get men, but again, we're not, they do things in an emotional way, so we don't get it. So I'm sure there have been women who have been flirting with me like crazy at times in my life, probably not now that I'm 46, that was probably younger, probably in college. Women were flirting with me. I had no clue, no idea. That's because they're doing their little subtle hints. I don't think emotionally. I don't understand that. And that's another great problem, and why you have such trouble, why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:28, such shall have trouble in the flesh, is that I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're thinking. Women think that men, they got the men's minds figured out. No, they don't. And men think they got women's minds figured out. No, they don't. Now, a lot of times a woman can guess what a man's going to do in a certain situation, but I can guess what my wife is going to do in a certain situation too. It's just you've been around them a long time. But you still don't know how their mind works. In other words, you could come to the same decision. You say, oh, well, my husband's going to do this, or my wife's going to do this. But you don't know how they arrived at that because your brain works differently. Anyway, God makes the man the head of the woman, so the man is going to pursue the woman because he's the head. So the way he does it is God makes his sex drive greater than the woman's sex drive. And in marriage, what a man is trying to do is the goal of marriage for the man is to get the emotional part, basically not be lonely. And for the women, it's the same thing, not be lonely, because they're missing, they're half ignorant, just like we're half ignorant. We're all half ignorant. So that makes us lonely, because we don't have the other part of our brain. So I won't put that on there. Both men and women are half ignorant, and they're lonely. So, but the main thing that differs between the man and the woman with the goal of marriage is the man, because he has a sex drive, he's trying to satisfy the sex drive. And for the woman, the goal is to overcome the curse. The curse being that she is under the man. We're told in Genesis 3 that her desire is to rule over the man, but that he will rule over her. So she wants to get the upper hand. Boy, that word curse. I'm terrible at writing. Okay. Woman wants to overcome the curse. So the way she does it, for the godly way of doing it, is 1 Timothy 2:15, childbearing. And she can't do that by herself. So this is the godly solution for the woman. Godly solution for the woman is childbearing. Okay, the godly solution for the man, he's under, his problem is, his part of the curse is that he's going to have to labor by the sweat of his brow. He's going to have to work hard. That's the thorns and thistles shall the ground bear unto you, God told Adam. You're going to be sweating a lot. You're going to be working hard. So the godly solution for the man is to have somebody support, emotional support emotionally in hard labor. So whatever it is, and you know, I always thought, oh, I'll have it easy if I go to college and I get a desk job. But I can tell you, I could work for, let's say, 8 hours and just think all day, and I'm more mentally exhausted. My body is both physically and mentally exhausted, but and I'm done. You know, that's it for the day. But if I do physical labor, let's say mow the grass or something, I'm tired, but I can get over that and do something else later on. Or, you know, like yesterday, I went to the gym first thing in the morning. And sure, I was tired afterward, but I rested, and then at night time, I mowed the grass. So I could do that. But mentally, it's hard. So actually, being tired is even harder than being physically tired. Either way, the man has to be in hard labor. So whether it's physical or mental, doesn't matter. And so he needs somebody to support him. So that's the main. This is godly solution for the man. So the man wants to satisfy his sex drive. The woman wants to overcome the curse, and hers is twofold. So the man, so overcome the curse is through trying to rule over the husband, rule over husband. So she's going to try to rule over her husband, and the man is just going to try to have sex. And that, in his mind, is how he is supported emotionally through the hard labor. But it's only with that one woman. Now, you can see evidence of the fact that there are, that man's sex drive is greater. So, and what God does is, and what He does is He allows men are allowed to marry multiple women. Multiple women. Women are not allowed to do that. They can't marry multiple men. Not allowed. You say that's a double standard. Well, yes, it is a double standard. And the reason is because men have the greater sex drive. So the problem is, if you just marry one woman, she's not gonna want to have sex with you as much as you want to. So then, problem solved. You just marry another woman. But there's several other problems that come with that. First off, financially. So you can be a man can be a polygamist, but the problem is, how are you going to pay for it? Because remember, the man is there to do the hard labor, to make the money, to take care of things, and the woman is there to help him emotionally. So if he is, a lot of times, especially today, I mean, the way things cost, that a man probably is not going to make it. He does good in this society. Usually, the woman has to have a job as well. So both the man and the woman. This is going against God's design, but both the man and the woman have to work full-time jobs just to support the financially speaking. So now the man is lacking the emotional support that he needs. The woman is lacking the childbearing and ruling over her husband, because now she's out there in the field, not at the home, trying to rule over her husband. So either way, when both the man and the woman work, it doesn't work out too good. So the problem is, in this society, that, yeah, men are allowed to marry multiple women, but how are you going to do that financially? And if you're rich, well then, now, the problem is they're not allowed to marry multiple men, so then they want to be with one man, and so then there's all this jealousy and things going on. I mean, Jacob is a great example. I don't know if I can find the chapter real quick. It's just hilarious reading. Well, I'm sure it wasn't hilarious to Jacob, but it's just hilarious to read some of this stuff that's back here with Jacob, because he wanted to marry Rachel, but he couldn't, because Laban tricked him, and he ended up marrying Leah instead. So then he ends up marrying Rachel too. So he finally got the woman he wanted to be with, but now he's with two women. And so here, Genesis 30, Rachel can't have any children. Leah's having kids left and right. She has 6 sons before you can bat an eye, and Rachel has no kids. And so the woman, Leah, sure, she's not attracted to, Jacob's not attracted to her, but she's safe through the childbearing. Rachel is, Jacob loves her and wants to be with her, but then she can't have any kids. So the sin nature works with both of them to where they both fight over Jacob. So you got here, you've got in Genesis 30 verse 14, Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field. Apparently that's supposed to make you fertile. And brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy sons mandrakes. I want to have kids. So then she said unto her, is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband, and wouldst thou take away my son's mandrakes also? Leah understands. There's a jealousy between the sisters there over Jacob. And Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob the 5th son. You just picture this? This is like Jacob, he's got 2 wives. He's allowed to marry multiple women. But look at the problem it creates. That Leah is having all the kids, so she's feeling good about that, but she doesn't feel loved by Jacob, so she feels bad about that. Rachel feels loved by Jacob, but then she feels bad about not having kids, so now she's not safe from the curse. So neither one is happy, and they're both fighting over Jacob. So here's Rachel. He's like, well, I could get pregnant if I get these mandrakes. And Leah's like, yeah, but you get to sleep with them all the time. So then Rachel says, fine, you sleep with Jacob tonight, and I'll take the mandrakes, and then I'll get to sleep with them later. And then God gives the child to Leah. You see the problem there with 2 women with 1 man? What's Jacob doing then? Jacob, you notice Jacob came out of the field in the evening in verse 16. Do you think he wants to have sex with either one of them? Probably not. He's probably pretty tired. He just came out of the evening. What he wants to do is he's looking for a good meal and to relax, clean up a little bit, and just rest for the rest of the day. Probably is what he wants. But his wives aren't going to allow him to do that, because they made it while he's out there working hard. They've made an agreement, and now he's forced to sleep with Leah, who he doesn't really love in the first place, but he's going to have to do it to please his wife. So it's like, well, I gotta sleep with my first wife, even though I'd really like to be with my second wife, because of this agreement that the 2 sisters had. And so, marrying multiple wives, yeah, he could do it, but was that a good thing? Jacob probably say, in hindsight, it'd been better if I was just with Leah. Or probably in hindsight said, better I wouldn't married at all, probably, than to have 2 women fighting over him like that. And again, it's not like he's some super attractive, hot guy and they want to be with him. They're thinking emotionally. And the man's thinking rationally. It's like, I just came in. I had a hard day. Why don't you just provide some emotional support and let me just rest? Why do I have to sleep with you right now? Sure, I have this enhanced sex drive and I want to sleep with both of you, but it's just too much right now. I mean, men, they don't always think sexually. You may think they do, but they don't, because they got other things going on too. You can be tired. Man can be tired. He can be hungry. The reason men are always willing to have sex is because their sex drive is greater. So they may not be in the mood. It's like the woman has to be in the mood. Well, the man may not be in the mood, but he figures, hey, I got to grab every chance I get because I'm not in the mood now, But when I am in the mood, when I'm rested up, or when I've eaten, then she's not going to be interested. So I got to grab every chance I get. So men are allowed to marry multiple women because of the enhanced sex drive. But it creates a lot of problems. So you'll see Abraham, for example, God's friend, the father of all believers. He slept with Hagar. He had Keturah. He had several. What was it? Genesis, I can never remember the name. Genesis 25. Keturah was a wife. He took him another wife. Verse 2, Genesis 25:2, she bare him Zimran and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shua. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He had at least 6 sons. 6 sons with another woman. The Bible doesn't really give you many details on it. But yeah, he's got multiple wives. Hagar, Sarai, Keturah. He's got multiple wives. David has multiple wives. David is going to be co-regent with Jesus in God's kingdom on earth. And he had multiple wives. And God had no problem with it. Abraham had multiple wives. God had no problem. You don't ever see God admonishing either Abraham or David for having multiple wives because men are allowed to marry multiple women. Now, God admonishes him for being with Bathsheba because she belonged to Uriah. He was with another man's husband, another man's wife. So, while there's nothing wrong with men having multiple wives, the thing, and this is the issue here, is that when men have multiple wives, men, by the way, the other thing we got to understand is sex equals marriage in God's Word. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's just, that's the way it is. When people talk about, you got to be married in the eyes of God. You know how you're married in the eyes of God? It has nothing to do with standing in front of a preacher. You're married in the eyes of God when the two have sex. Because the two, when they have sex, become one flesh. And when the two become one flesh, that's marriage. Two become one. It's marriage. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 16. 1 Corinthians 6:16. What? Know ye not that he which is joined to a harlot is one body? For two saith he shall be one flesh. I mean, the loosest sexual union you've got is a man sleeping with a prostitute. This isn't a girlfriend that you love, that you're thinking about marrying, or that you're living with, or someone that you're already married to, or a mistress on the side. I mean, this is someone that you went up to and say, I have this enhanced sex drive, here's $50, let's sleep together. And you sleep with her. According to this verse, when a man sleeps with a harlot, he's married to her. That's marriage. Okay? So every sexual relationship is marriage. And so whenever a man has sex with a woman, then he is married to her, assuming that they're not married to somebody else. And the way it is, sex equals marriage, and remember, the man is the head of the woman. So then, now a man, through sex, a man is now the head of the woman. So as the head, now he has to take care of her. So you got that in Deuteronomy and Mosaic Law and all that, and it'll tell you that. So let's say you've got all kinds of money, and you just want to sleep with multiple women. Case in point, Solomon. Solomon has 1,000 wives. 1,000 wives, not 2. You saw the problems Jacob had with 2. Solomon has all the money in the world. He has 1,000 wives. God doesn't have a problem with that. God does not have a problem with Solomon having 1,000 wives. He can do that. But the thing is, he's got to take care of them all. Now, if you're king, you got all this money, he can do it. But the bigger problem of all of this is when you have multiple wives. And God told Israel that a king, and Solomon was a king, do not multiply wives unto yourself. So a king should not do that. God tells us in the dispensation of grace a bishop, 1 Timothy 3. Husband of one wife. That's not to say that like me, it's not that I can't be a bishop because I'm not married. What it means is that you're not going to have multiple wives at the same time. God allows it, but you can't have multiple wives. There are a couple reasons for that. The main reason for the king not multiplying wives unto himself, do not multiply, I didn't put the word wife in there. Do not multiply wives unto yourself. Okay. The main reason for the king, and you see that with Solomon, he gets into Baal worship because by multiplying wives, the women are the emotional support. So the way he thinks rationally is, I want to please the woman so that she will support me. Instead of being an emotional hindrance to me, she'll be an emotional support. So when I married women who serve Baal, then to support her, so that she will be an emotional support to me, to help me out, rather than being an emotional hindrance to me, then I am going to build a temple to Baal, and I'm going to serve and sacrifice to these other gods. So, and for the bishop, the reason he shouldn't have multiple women is the same reason. Basically, it's not that you'd be worshiping Baal and Ashtaroth in this environment today, but you would be turned away to the pleasures of the flesh. 1 Corinthians 7, I think I mentioned it, 1 Corinthians 7:28, that when a man gets married to a woman, such are going to have trouble in the flesh. Well, it's really, and the issue he says in 1 Corinthians 7, and we'll get to this next time, is that it's best if you don't get married. Because if you get married, now you've got to try to take care of the flesh of the other person. If you're not married, you can just concentrate on serving God. This is for both men and women. Because the woman, she's got to have sex more than she wants to. She's going to have to, do things that she doesn't want to do. She's trying to think emotionally, and she's got to think rationally to help please her husband. And the man's trying to think rationally, but he's got to think emotionally to try to please the wife. And so nobody's happy. And so then I don't have the time to read God's Word and believe it and use the mind of Christ, because now I'm trying to use the mind of the woman, which I don't have, and try to make her happy so that she'll make me happy from the emotional standpoint, rather than being an emotional hindrance. And the woman has got to try to think along with the man. Again, she doesn't have the man's mind, so that his rationality will be a help to her rather than a hindrance. So then you got to compromise and think of the other flesh, and the result is you're not thinking on the things of God as much. So the more wives you have, the more you've got to think and please all of those women. And of course, a man can't even please one woman because she thinks emotionally and he thinks rationally. So she's never going to be happy. Happy for a second, but then she's not happy later on because you did something or said something that she didn't like. She doesn't think you love her anymore. Never mind. And you're thinking, well, that makes absolutely no sense, because I live with you. I've been living only with you for all these years. I provide for a house. I go to a job. I do things I don't want to do just to take care of you. And you think just because I looked at you some way that now I don't love you anymore. Well, rationally, that makes absolutely no sense. But emotionally, it makes perfect sense. And then the woman, she says, well, you don't love me. Or the other way around is she's concentrating on the emotional standpoint and not the rational. And the man's concentration on the rational than the emotional. And so the woman thinks the man doesn't love her. And the man thinks that the woman really isn't interested in helping him out emotionally, because the woman thinks that he doesn't love her, therefore she's not on his side emotionally. So you got all kinds of problems. And that's just when you're married to one person. So that's why it says, such shall have trouble in the flesh. And Paul is talking to believers here, body of Christ, because he knows that although you can use the mind of Christ, you're not going to do it all the time. So he says, best not to get married, then you'll have to deal with that. You say, but I've only got a rational mind. Or the woman says, I've only got an emotional mind. Well, in this world, it's going to be hard for you to make it just with half a brain. But the things in this world are going to pass away. So you just struggle along on the half that you don't understand and get by somehow. But then you can use the mind of Christ in more things. So then you don't really have to worry so much about pleasing. You don't have to worry about pleasing the other person's flesh because you don't have to consider it. That's wonderful only if you're using the mind of Christ and not your fleshly mind. Because if you use your fleshly mind, well, then you're going to sin, and your sin nature is going to get way out there, and you won't care, and you won't have a spouse to try to reel you back in. So, so that's why that although men are allowed to marry multiple women, but women are not allowed to marry multiple men. Still, it's a good idea for men not to marry multiple women. Financially speaking, you can't do it, usually. The vast majority of people can't do it. And now you can't use the mind of Christ at all, because now not only are you trying to please one woman, you're trying to please two or three. It's just not going to work. So that's why you notice with the kings, it says, do not multiply wives unto yourself. The bishop is to be a husband of one wife. And that's because these are leaders. So the point is, how are you going to lead if you're concerned with the flesh? And then another factor in all of this is what happened with Solomon. So not only did trying to please his wife's fleshly desires lead him into serving other gods, but another thing is women are really big on religion. Men, we don't care. We don't care what the pastor says. We don't care about that stuff. We care about pleasing, because we're not emotional, so we're not going to try to please the structure that we're under. I can sit there and listen to my grandparents. My grandmother went along with the Pentecostal Holiness Church her entire life. My grandfather went to please her and was a good Christian man, but there's some of the things there that he didn't participate in, he didn't care, but he just goes along with it. Not that because in his rational mind, those things didn't make sense. But so that his wife would be an emotional help rather than a hindrance, he gives away to her. Which is why I say, marriage, the perfect marriage, is where no one is happy. Okay, but when you're a king or you're a bishop, now you're a leader. And not only is it a trouble having multiple wives in that you're trying to please their flesh, but a big factor here in being a leader is now, because remember, man has a greater sex drive. And what's great about being married to one woman is that one of the greatest benefits in the flesh, one of the greatest fleshly benefits that a woman has as a wife is to keep the man's sexual drive under control so it just doesn't go crazy. Because you can only sleep with one woman, and that's your wife. And your wife doesn't want to sleep with you as much as you want to sleep with her. So then you've got to learn control. And even if she is willing to sleep with you every time that you want to sleep with her, it's just not going to work. Maybe one of you is sick, or let's say she's sick. Maybe she's having her menstrual cycle. Maybe she's pregnant. There are other factors. Maybe it's just physically speaking, without, like I say, I'm not going to get into details, but physically speaking, maybe it's not possible at that moment. So, the point is, even if you've got a wife who is willing to sleep with you as much as you want to sleep with her, because she's submitting herself to her husband, which is a godly woman should do, even in those cases, your sex drive is still going to be curtailed, because there are going to be cases when you don't go along with that, when it's just physically not possible or not practical or not the best thing to do, and you'll notice that. So the sex drive of the man is greatly curtailed by being married to one woman. But if Solomon has 1,000 wives, he can go to wife number 1. Okay, let's sleep together. No, I'm tired. Okay, wife number 2. Hey, you want to sleep together? No, I'm just not feeling good. Okay, wife number 3, you want to sleep together? I'm busy right now. Okay, wife number 4, you want to sleep together? Sure. All right, let's go. In other words, Solomon's sex drive is not curtailed at all because he's got multiple wives. So you don't have to worry about the other part of it because, and by the way, the women are more likely to sleep with him because they want to get favor with him and get more time with him, and so that he could, because now 1,000 women are sharing one man's brain, and there isn't much rational behavior there to go around. So the big problem with the polygamy stuff is that you can't keep track of the women and to keep them all emotionally happy, and so your rational thinking is out the window. So you can't have a leader, a king or a bishop. You can't have a leader because you're not going to use the mind of Christ. All you're going to do is use your flesh to try to please your wife's flesh. With one wife, it's fine. And the great thing about having one wife is she's going to greatly curtail your sex drive. And that's why, actually, it's probably preferred. Although, I'm not married, it would be preferred if I had a godly wife to be married to curtail the sex drive. Well, at my age, probably doesn't matter. Maybe it matters a little bit, but if I'm 19 or 25, yeah, definitely got to get married. To keep that sex drive at bay. And the benefits of keeping the sex drive at bay as opposed to the detriment of having to try to please my wife's flesh instead of thinking on the mind of Christ. The benefits outweigh the cost. But now at my age, probably not. Anyway, so the leaders are not to multiply wives to themselves. But a big thing, and this is where we're at 30 minutes, so we'll cut it short here. The big thing, we'll talk about this next time. The big thing is that we are in a woman's world. I could give scripture to show that David and Abraham and Solomon and all these people could have multiple wives. And let's say I'm not a bishop or a king. And so I could do that and God will be perfectly fine with it. I can't do it in this society. The polygamy is illegal. I could go to jail. I don't know what they do for a polygamist. But I can't do that. However, I can do all sorts of sexual sins other than that, and I'm fine. So what God says is that because He realizes a man has a greater sex drive than a woman, He allows polygamy for women, and that would take care of that problem. But yet, and usually the financial constraints would keep you from having more than 2, maybe 3 wives. Probably not going to be able to have more than that. That's probably why Joseph Smith said 3 wives. You just financially can't support more than that. And so then it won't be so bad because maybe the sex drive of a woman is maybe 1/3 of the man. So having the 3 wives, and maybe that would balance out and you'd be fine. You wouldn't use the mind of Christ as much, so you're not going to please the Lord as much. But at least it keeps you from getting involved in sexual sin. But the problem is that in our society, this is not allowed. You can't marry multiple women. So then what men do is they get into other sins. And that's why pornography is such a big problem today. Is because, number one, it's so easily obtainable. Number two, we're living in a woman's world where God's solution to the greater sex drive of polygamy is not an option. So then men get sexually deviant in another way. And Satan, as the god of this world, is laughing about it all the way to all the way into hell because he gets to get people to go by the depravity of their flesh and not use the mind of Christ. So, okay, that's it for this one.